Hello, this is Reverend Don Lewis coming to you from the beautiful metaverse and more specifically from beautiful Danville, Illinois, homeland of the Corellian tradition. And this is Midday with Reverend Don. Welcome. And as you know, if you follow Midday with Reverend Don, you can type your questions or comments into whatever platform you're watching on. And on most of those platforms, your comments will appear here in my chat room and we can talk directly. And I hope that you are having a lovely week. My subject today is advanced shadow work. And I wanted to talk today about ways in which shadow work can be used other than individually. And hello to Bimby in the chat room. It's good to see you, Bimby. And I do want to take a moment to say, however, that if you enjoy my work and you would like to support my work, a good way to do that is through my Patreon at revdonlewis.com. And last night in my chat room, we got to meet Kayleen, who is often here viewing our program, and it was a wonderful, wonderful experience to get to meet her. And hello to Renee in the chat room. It's good to see you, Renee. And of course, Renee is also one of my patrons, and um, we're looking forward to seeing her later in the week. I hope that your day is going well. And we were talking yesterday largely, and hello to Nikki Dodd in the chat room, largely about what shadow is, what we mean when we talk about shadow and shadow work. Um, and as sometimes happens, the conversation wandered into various places, like the idea of harm none and free will. Um, and we may find ourselves wandering in various places today, but as I say, I want to talk today about using shadow work in non-personal ways, things that aren't about this life. And there are a couple of different ways that you can use shadow work um, for things that um, are different from the straightforward shadow work that you do to um, to deal with current issues. And one of them is working with past lives. Now, shadow work in general is about karmic disentanglement. The shadow is also another way of describing karma. It's another way of describing energy blockage. These things all come down basically to the same idea, expressed in different ways. When we do shadow work, we're affecting our karma. We're dealing with the causes of our karma, and we are unraveling aspects of our karma. The idea of karma, at least as I understand karma, is attachment, that we attach to certain things, mostly because we need to learn from them, or we've been so impacted to them that we are attached to them. And generally speaking, we continue to repeat them until we are able to naturally let go of that attachment. But there are other ways to do this as well, and one of them is through shadow work. I was talking about soul retrieval as being one of the most effective forms of shadow work that I have found, and this is particularly useful for karmic disentanglement. Um, when we do shadow work, we're looking for those attachments or blockages or shadows that are binding our energy and holding us back from things. And we look for the causes and release them. We heal them. We transmute them. And this can be done intellectually through things like soul retrieval. It can be done emotionally through things like burning spells, I mentioned as one way of doing it. It can be done physically through certain forms of massage and physical manipulation. Um, there are different ways to approach it. There are people who believe that it can be done also by going to certain areas that have a vibration that will affect karmic connections. This is an important idea, I believe, in Jainism and I believe Hinduism, that certain areas are effective for helping to release karmic entanglements. These are all different possibilities of how to address these issues. But they all speak to our personal karma. And um, karma is a far more complex idea than what most people represent it as. Most people represent karma as simple cause and effect. And that is certainly not my understanding, though that is part of it. Um, but it's really coming down to attachment. And there is an idea in some forms of metaphysics that karma works on a three-ply rule that you must experience your karma 3 times before you can release it. But my experience has been that you're lucky if it's only 3 times. Very often we hold on to it far longer than that. Um, and sometimes we don't hold on to it at all. And this is in keeping with the attitude of certain Eastern religions and different from others. Um, when we look at shadow work, there is usually a great deal there, both from things we've experienced in this life, but also previous lives. And so when we deal with it, we're not just dealing with our contemporary issues, we're dealing with long-term issues of our soul. And hello to Wendy in the chat room. It's good to see you, Wendy. Long-term issues that that sometimes affect our soul very deeply. It's a common trope in metaphysical circles about the person who has phobias because of past life issues, but this is something you absolutely do encounter. And often it's difficult or even may never happen that you can find what that past life was that started that fear. Hello to Maria in the chat room. It's good to see you, Maria. Other times you can. For example, through most of my life, I've had a fear of falling. Not a fear of heights exactly, but a fear of falling. I could handle the height just fine, but the fear of falling, even from a short distance, was something that was hard for me to deal with. But from an early age, I have been under the impression that one of my past lives was my elder sister, who died many years before I was born. I think 14 years before I was born. And she died partly as a result of a fall. So I believe that's where that phobia came from. And that, of course, allows me to then do soul retrieval to heal that fear. I have a friend named Judy from many years ago, and she had a fear of water. And this was a debilitating fear. Not like bathtub water, but although I've known people who had that problem also, but she had a fear of being on a body of water in a boat or going swimming. And for many years, she had no idea why she had this fear. But as she started to work in metaphysics, she basically asked Spirit to show her the reason. One day she was watching television. She was watching a special or a program on the wreck of the Lady Elgin, which is a famous a famous wreck of a ship around early 20th century, I believe, in which a number of people died. And she realized watching this that this was affecting her far too emotionally for it not to have relevance to her. And she realized that that was one of her past lives. She was able to then use that to heal her phobia of water. These are ways in which shadow work can be very helpful to us, but you don't need to necessarily know the origin to use shadow work to heal a fear or a phobia. And hello to Vivian in the chat room. It's good to see you, Vivian. You can instead work on whatever, quote, whatever is the root of the problem without having to know the root of the problem. One of the nice things about something like soul retrieval is that you don't necessarily have to know the reason. It's nice if you do. Maybe faster if you do. but you don't have to. You need to know what it is you're trying to heal. And you can approach that without knowing the cause. Now, this is all talking about generalities of shadow work. I wanted to talk about non-personal ways to use shadow work, and one of using it in past lives, of course, is still personal. I actually, for example, on the subject of soul retrieval, I first learned it as a tool for past life healing. We were at that time working with many souls who were in need of crossing over, and I was taught this technique as a way of helping souls to release what was binding them and be able to cross over when they had become stuck between the worlds. I would add to that, and I suppose I should explain that. Sometimes when we die, part of us is still stuck here because of things that need to be released. And world walkers can help a soul to release that. And soul retrieval is one of the ways they do that. And I am of the opinion that it's very often only part of the energy of the soul that is stuck. That much of the energy can cross over and some still be stuck here. And that's part of the shadow as the soul goes on to future incarnations. So one of the things that can happen is that parts of your shadow can be freed through other parts of your soul that you're not conscious of. And you simply notice the change in this life. When you work as a world walker to help other souls to cross over, this is helpful to whatever other incarnations they have. And sometimes you may even find parts of your own energy caught in that way that you were not aware of. And this is, in my opinion, a kind of advanced shadow work because it isn't necessarily for yourself. It's for the different souls that you're working with as a world walker. One of the things I often talk about are Ouija boards. And some people are so frightened of these, which is largely a result of the entertainment media, followed by Christian propaganda. For most of their history, up until the mid-20th century, there were no scary stories about Ouija boards. It's a very modern phenomenon, and not one that I think should be taken terribly seriously, though you do need to know how to use them to have a good result. When I first started world walking, when I first started to learn clairvoyance, Lady Crystal used a Ouija board as a teaching implement to help open the third eye to receive the messages. It worked very well for that. Then we moved on without it because it's a very primitive technique, but it has its role if it's used properly. And, I was talking the other day, if someone wants to use anything to have a spooky experience, well, they can't really complain when they get that because they've manifested it. It's what they set out to do. When you use spiritual tools, you need to use them spiritually. Another way in which you can use shadow work in what I would consider a very advanced technique is geographically. What do I mean by that? I've talked about how items can take a negative energetic charge. Recently, on my recent metaphysical and magic auction, we were offering, quote, haunted dolls. But I was talking about why such a thing can happen. And I wouldn't really consider it a haunting. I would say that they have obtained, generally speaking, not excluding all circumstances, but generally speaking, they've simply obtained a negative energetic charge. What do you do with that? You clear the charge, and you no longer have a problem. But this can happen to an object that is exposed to a highly traumatic event or a long series of emotional traumas. It can happen to a building. It can happen to a geographic area. The Gettysburg battlefield, for example, is famous for its hauntings. This is an example of how an area obtained a negative charge by something traumatic that happened on it. Um, this happens with buildings frequently. Some of the most famous examples are the Amityville Horror, which, although highly exaggerated, is still not necessarily a bad example. Um, and um, Lamb's Castle in the UK, um, and various other traditional castles in the UK and Europe, which have famous examples of hauntings caused by traumatic events that happened there. These are things that could be addressed through shadow work if you want to clear that charge. Now, one of the most famous examples is the Tower of London has a lot of them, but one of the most famous examples is Catherine Howard practicing for her beheading. And the night before she was to be beheaded, I believe it was Catherine Howard, she spent many hours practicing how to lay her neck upon the block so that she would do it gracefully the following day. And many people have claimed to have a vision of her still doing this, I believe at the Tower of London. And that's a famous haunting example. And it's one that nobody is interested in clearing because it's a major tourist site. Spiritually, it probably should be cleared, but a part of that lady's energy is caught there. It repeats that moment until eventually it is freed. Shadow work is how you would free it. And it would cleanse that area. And how would you do that? How would you cleanse a place like the Amityville house? Now, the story of the Amityville house is mostly nonsense, and the people involved in creating it have largely admitted that at this point, which doesn't mean there was nothing there, but they greatly exaggerated it. But did that house have, and might it still have, a negative charge? Well, yes, it might very well. Some places do. And shadow work is the way that you address that. Now, not everyone's going to call that shadow work, but it is shadow work. You might call it an exorcism if you're dramatic. The term is applicable, but I would rather simply call it shadow work. And in my opinion, one of the best ways to do that is through soul retrieval, but you're doing it for a place, not for an individual. You're doing it for the genius loci, the spirit of that place, to cleanse that spirit, that place of the negative charge. You do it just the same way that you would do soul retrieval for a person. And I have done this on the occasion of a number of things that have happened with seeming success, with clearing that negative charge that is left behind. And I think that this is one of the more advanced ways to use shadow work. And, I've talked, you must have a moment of coffee, but, I've talked about how if you're dealing with any kind of quote, negative manifestation, any kind of negative haunting or what have you, or a poltergeist or what have you, what do? Well, you cleanse the energy. These things cannot manifest without sufficient energy. If you eliminate the fuel, you eliminate the fire. But it's also good to do that deeper shadow work to heal and transmute the cause. So let's say that you wanted to ruin the tourist attraction of Catherine Howard practicing for her execution. Well, you'd want to do a soul retrieval for the spirit of that lady and also for the physical location. Because I believe that her spirit may very well at this point have moved on, but have left an impression on the location that continues to give people that vision. And what you would do is you would do the soul retrieval. We've talked about soul retrieval before. Maybe I will briefly go through the steps that I would use for a soul retrieval. But you would heal and free up that energy. Now, when I talk about soul retrieval, I'm talking about the Corellian form of soul retrieval. There's also a more generic shamanic form of soul retrieval, which is very different, even though it's basically the same idea. Corellian soul retrieval is something very particular, and it is a technique um, basically of 9 steps. And those steps involve connecting with the spirit world and with deity, however you see deity, however deity presents itself to you, and asking for healing of that which is to be healed, whether it's a personal issue, a geographic space, what have you, asking for the acceptance of that healing, or for help with the acceptance of that healing, asking for the integration of that healing. There are particular visualizations to go with each of these, and usually we use a yellow light passing through uh, for the healing itself, um, a feeling of warmth passing through for the acceptance, and a sweeping into the heart chakra for the integration. Then a releasing of all the burdens that have been held. And these are suffused with the purple energy of transmutation from spirit, followed by forgiveness and releasing on the part of the individual or the place. And this is very important, because if you cannot forgive and release it, you cannot let it go. A lot of people take the word forgiveness in a certain sense which is more than or different than what it actually means. They think of it as letting go of all consequences, letting go of all judgment, etc. What it really means, at least in the context of soul retrieval, is you let go of your attachment to it. You forgive and release it, and no longer carry that weight. Very important step. Then you ask for the lost parts to be returned. I always see those as little bits of light that come into the aura. My aura, the aura of a particular space, the aura of a person I'm working with. And then you go through those first 3 steps again: healing, acceptance, and integration. And all of these steps, in my opinion, are very important. And finally, you give thanks to Spirit for having helped you to do this. And you can envision Spirit in any number of different ways. People I've worked with certainly have done so. The most interesting one, many years ago, I worked with a man named Roderick, who envisioned Spirit as a tree on a hill. And there were little spiritual squirrel rats who came up to help with the process. But this was very effective in working with Roderick. Some people will see Spirit as whatever their individual deity is. Some will simply perceive it as light. Some people will perceive it as their higher self. It doesn't matter. And that, I think, is one of the most important things in metaphysics. And I'm going to go back to the phrase we've often used: love your platform, love your message, not your platform. Almost got it backwards. You want to love the message, not the platform. When we talk about deity, it's the essence, not the image, that matters. One of the mistakes that many of the big religions make is that you confuse the image for the substance. How you envision deity need not limit your connection to deity in any way. You can let it limit it. You can let it do all kinds of things, but ideally it should only help. And whatever way that you envision deity can be equally effective, because the image is just the platform. The essence is the message, and you want to connect to the essence of deity. And that is why in paganism we have so many different ways of understanding deity. because in the end, they're all equally good and all equally bad. They're different ways of approaching what the vast majority of people agree is there and have experienced. My grandmother used to point out that people in all religions will tell you the same basic experiences. They've all had miracles. They all pray and get answers to their prayers in one way or another. They may have different ways of approaching deity, but they all do, and they all get results. So you either have to make the assumption that they're all imagining this and they're all wrong, or they're all right. The idea that only one of them can be right and the others are having the same effects for bad reasons is silly. And yes, I know that some of the big religions take that point of view, but it's still silly. You judge. You borrowed a phrase from one of those big religions. You judge the tree by its fruits. And if people are getting answers to their prayers and miraculous happenings and so forth, they obviously have a connection to deity, and people in all religions have this. And when it comes to shadow work, it doesn't matter what religion you are. The things that work still work. It doesn't matter what religion a soul was in a past life, the things that work still work. If you're trying to heal a particular place, it doesn't matter what the religion of the people who lived there or who may have been involved in the traumas that caused the blockages was. What works still works. And I think that's what you will find. And I think that's true throughout metaphysics in general. And I hope you find that helpful. I see that we've come to the end of our half hour, so I want to take a moment for a message from our sponsors, because we love our sponsors. And here. Ready to unlock the secrets of the universe? Join me, Reverend Don Lewis, for my metaphysical and magic auctions at Gaia Thrift at whatnot.com. Discover fascinating artifacts, mystical crystals, and rare and unusual books that could change your life. Don't miss this chance to bring a little magic into your world. Reverend Don's Metaphysical and Magic Auctions, where the extraordinary can become yours. And thank you to our sponsors, Equinox Learning Hub and Reverend Don's Metaphysical and Magic Auctions. And I will let you know when our next auction is coming. And I hope that you are having a lovely day. I hope you've enjoyed the program. And, I think if I wanted to sum up, not exactly my subject for today, but the most important message, it is that last one, that what works, works. And it doesn't necessarily matter what direction you approach it from. And I think that if you look at the world's religions, you will find that the more advanced people from every background end up saying basically the same things, even though at the broader edges, they may look very different. But when people experience spiritual growth, they find in the end the same thing, that what works, works. And I think you'll find that regardless of your path. And I think that this is an important part of understanding the nature of existence. When we incarnate, when we live, we naturally develop differences. We become very individual, very uh, involuted, for want of a better word for it, and um, this is part of the whole experience. It's part of the purpose of the experience. But as we grow spiritually, we find the universality of things, and I have described the process of incarnation in my works as being one of becoming involuted to the point of intense focus in the physical world, and then spiritually evolving back to a point of universality. And I think in the end, that describes it very well. So I want to wish you a happy day, and we will close with our prayer, as we always do. Divine Mother Goddess, Divine Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you for all that you do for us in our lives, and we ask you to help us to always remember the good things that surround us and to take the best advantage of the opportunities life offers us. Beloved Mother Goddess, beloved Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you with great love and knowing you're always with us. We thank you for your presence from respect. May you be blessed now and always. I thank you for your presence, and may you be blessed now and always, and I will see you again tomorrow.